Beatrice Thorne was a ghost at her own family's table. At 28, she was the eldest spinster, the plain, practical daughter left behind, while her younger sisters, Rosalind and Cecily, dazzled society and married wealthy lords. They had titles, jewels, and the pity of the London ton. Beatrice had her father's ledgers and the damp chill of Thorncroft Manor. But when the most powerful, ruthless, and untouchable man in England, Alistair St. John, the Duke of Ravenswood, arrives in their small parish, the sisters expect a prize. They never imagined he was there for the one woman no one ever saw. In the county of Hertfordshire, the Thorne family was known for two things: their crumbling manor, Thorncroft, and the beauty of their youngest daughters. Thorncroft itself was a respectable house, but the damp in the east wing was winning the war against the family's dwindling finances. Sir Reginald Thorne, a gentleman obsessed with obscure botany, had long since ceded control of the household to his eldest daughter, Beatrice. Beatrice, at 28, was considered firmly on the shelf. She was not ugly, but she possessed a quiet, thoughtful face in an era that prized dazzling smiles and coy glances. Her hair was a simple brown, pulled back not for fashion, but for function. While her sisters had sketched and practiced the pianoforte, Beatrice had learned crop rotation, land drainage, and how to make the estate's meagre income stretch one more month. Her sisters were gone, and in society's eyes, they were the family's great successes. Rosalind, the classic beauty, had married Lord Ashworth, a baron with a respectable estate. Cecily, the vivacious charmer, had captured Viscount Pinewood, a man with connections in London. They were Lady Ashworth and Viscountess Pinewood. Beatrice remained Miss Thorne. Her days were a cycle of accounts, tenant disputes, and listening to her father read aloud from his botanical journals. She was invisible, and she had, for the most part, made her peace with it. The peace was shattered by a letter arriving with the morning post. "My dears," Sir Reginald exclaimed, waving the thick, creamy cardstock. "Your sisters are returning, and they bring marvellous news." Beatrice paused, her pen hovering over a column of figures for the seed merchant. "That is lovely, Father." "What news?" "The local summer ball at the Assembly Rooms. It is to be the event of the season. Not only are Rosalind and Cecily attending, but it is rumoured, no, confirmed, that the Duke of Ravenswood himself will be in attendance." Beatrice frowned. "Ravenswood? Here? Why?" Alistair St. John, the Duke of Ravenswood, was not just a duke. He was the Duke. He owned half of Derbyshire and a considerable portion of industrial Leeds. His wealth was rumoured to rival the Crown's. He was a political powerhouse, a man whose quiet word in the House of Lords could topple one of Sir Robert Peel's ministers. He was also, by all accounts, a man made of granite, cold, unmarried, and utterly uninterested in provincial society. "Who cares why?" Sir Reginald beamed. "It is a great honour. Your sisters are, of course, terribly excited. They will be here by the end of the week to prepare." Beatrice felt the familiar, dull ache of anxiety. Her sisters' visits meant chaos. It meant fashionable demands, thinly veiled pity, and a strain on the household budget she couldn't afford. And the Duke, he was merely a complication. She was more worried about the leaking roof in the library. "I shall have Mrs. Gable air out their rooms," Beatrice said, turning back to her ledger. "Beatrice, dear," her father said gently, "you will need a new gown for the ball." "My blue silk will do," she murmured. "That is 5 years old," he fretted. "Then it is," Beatrice replied, dipping her pen in the ink. "A well-acquainted friend." She had tenants to think about, not ball gowns. The Duke of Ravenswood was a problem for other women. Rosalind and Cecily descended upon Thorncroft like a whirlwind of silk, lace, and London gossip. They kissed their father, patted Beatrice on the cheek, and immediately began rearranging the furniture in the drawing room, complaining about the light. "Beatrice, darling, you simply must do something about this wallpaper," Rosalind, Lady Ashworth, sighed, peeling a corner with her gloved finger. She was willowy and fair, and her pity was always delivered with a beautiful smile. "The damp, you know," Beatrice replied, noting the cost of new paper in her head. "I find it historic." "It's mould, Beatrice." Cecily, Viscountess Pinewood, laughed. Cecily was all bright curls and sharp wit. "And honestly, the entire house smells of wet dogs and— Is that cabbage?" "Cook is preparing dinner," Beatrice said stiffly. That evening, the sisters dominated the conversation, speaking of London, of parties, and, inevitably, of the Duke. "They say he is looking for a wife," Cecily announced, tapping her spoon. "He is 35. It's high time he secured the succession. His bank, Coutts & Co., is apparently urging him to settle his affairs." "He won't find one here," Rosalind scoffed. "Can you imagine? The Duchess of Ravenswood, from our little village. He is probably just inspecting his land holdings. The Ravenswood estate borders ours to the north, doesn't it?" "Yes," Beatrice said, her interest piqued for the first time. "The northern marshes. The drainage there is terrible. It floods our lower fields every spring." Rosalind stared at her. "Beatrice, we are discussing the most powerful peer in England, and you are worried about mud." "The mud is our income, Rosalind," Beatrice said quietly. "Oh, let her be," Cecily said, waving a dismissive hand. "She enjoys her little farm. But Beatrice, for the ball. That blue silk? Again. You look like a governess." "It is all I have." "Nonsense," Rosalind declared. "We shall lend you something. I have a yellow muslin. It might fit you. It's a bit simple, but it will be better than that shroud." The implication stung, but Beatrice merely nodded. "That is kind of you." The night of the ball arrived. The assembly rooms were packed. The arrival of Lady Ashworth and Viscountess Pinewood created a stir. But when the Duke of Ravenswood was announced, a hush fell over the entire room. He was taller than Beatrice had imagined, with severe, handsome features and dark hair. He did not look like a man at a party. He looked like a general surveying a battlefield. He nodded curtly to the hosts, bypassed the line of fluttering debutantes, and stood near a pillar, observing. Rosalind and Cecily, holding court by the lemonade table, were incandescent with excitement. "He's looking this way," Cecily whispered. "Naturally," Rosalind murmured, adjusting her shawl. "We are the highest-ranking women here, after all." Beatrice, feeling ridiculous in Rosalind's borrowed, slightly too tight yellow muslin, had retreated to a quiet alcove to help a flustered servant who had dropped a tray of glasses. She was kneeling, helping him pick up the shards of glass, when a large shadow fell over her. "Allow me," a deep voice said. Beatrice looked up and up. She was looking directly into the unsmiling, intense grey eyes of the Duke of Ravenswood. He was holding out a handkerchief for her as her finger was bleeding. "Oh," she said, flustered. "Thank you, Your Grace. It's nothing." She stood, brushing off her skirt. The servant had vanished in terror. The entire room was silent. Every eye was on them. The Duke ignored the stares. He looked at her, truly looked at her, with an assessing gaze that was neither kind nor unkind. It was interested. "You are Miss Thorne," he stated. It was not a question. "I am, Your Grace." Her sisters were watching, their faces frozen in identical masks of horror and confusion. He was supposed to be talking to them. "I had hoped to make your acquaintance," the Duke said, his voice carrying easily in the silence. "You are a difficult woman to find." Beatrice blinked. I I am almost always at Thorncroft, Your Grace. Indeed, he said. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, so faint it might have been imagined. You and I have business to discuss. I shall call on you, tomorrow, at 11. He bowed, a formal, correct gesture. Then, without a word to anyone else, not to Rosalind, not to Cecily, not to the gaggle of hopeful mothers, he turned and walked out of the ballroom. The music stuttered back to life. The whispers were deafening. Beatrice stood alone, holding a bloody ducal handkerchief, the target of every eye in the room. The next morning, Thorncroft was in a state of utter panic. Sir Reginald was flustered, the cook was threatening to quit, and Beatrice's sisters were vibrating with a mixture of jealousy and suspicion. "What did you say to him?" Rosalind demanded, pacing the drawing room. "He spoke to no one else." "I helped a servant," Beatrice said, arranging the only good teacups. "He offered me a handkerchief. That was all." "That was not all," Cecily snapped. "He said you had business. What business could you possibly have with the Duke of Ravenswood? He looked at you as if you were an equation." "Perhaps he prefers equations to empty flattery," Beatrice retorted, her patience wearing thin. At precisely 11, the Duke's black carriage, bearing the imposing Ravenswood crest, rolled up the gravel drive. He was alone. He was shown into the drawing room, where the entire family was assembled like a nervous tribunal. He bowed to Sir Reginald and her sisters, his face polite, but remote. "Your Grace," Sir Reginald began, "a pleasure, but we are at a loss." The Duke's gaze settled on Beatrice. "Miss Thorne, I would prefer to conduct our business in your father's study, if it is available, and with you alone." The collective gasp was audible. For a man to request to be alone with an unmarried woman was scandalous. "Your Grace, that is highly irregular," Rosalind stammered. Beatrice, however, felt a strange calm. This man didn't operate by the same rules as everyone else. "Of course, Your Grace. This way, please." She led him to the study, her father's beloved, cluttered room. The Duke closed the door, shutting out the furious whispers from the hall. He did not sit, but walked to the window, looking out over the fields. "The northern marsh," he said. "It floods your lower pasture and my western tenancy farms." "Yes," Beatrice said, standing by the desk. "It has for generations. The chalk bedrock doesn't allow for proper drainage." He turned to her. 3 months ago, a Mr. R. Thorne began a correspondence with my estate manager, Mr. Harding. This Mr. Thorne proposed a radical, frankly brilliant, solution. Not just drainage ditches, but a series of deep-cut channels using pressurized steam-driven pumps to divert the water to the Gade River, creating a new reservoir for the dry season. Beatrice held her breath. "R. Thorne. Reginald Thorne. My father." The Duke smiled, a true, cutting smile this time. "Your father is a botanist. His last publication was on the pollination habits of the Ophrys apifera. He has no interest in hydrology. I, however, do. I recognized the handwriting on the initial proposal. It was the same handwriting I saw on a petition for parish road repairs last year, signed by one Miss Beatrice Thorne." He reached into his breast pocket and produced a folded letter. "Her letter." "You knew," she whispered. "I suspected," Alistair said. Harding was dismissive. He said the plan was too expensive, too new. I told him to implement it. 2 months ago, my engineers began work on my side of the border. The initial results are remarkable. My western farms are projected to increase their yield by 40%. You, Miss Thorne, are a genius." Beatrice felt light-headed. I just saw a problem and found a solution." "You found a solution that seasoned engineers scoffed at. You have saved me, conservatively, £50,000, and you did it from this dusty room, using your father's name, because you knew no one would listen to a woman." He paused, his gaze pinning her. "Which brings me to my business. The project is stalled. My engineers cannot solve the pressure variance in the main pump. Your calculations were theoretical. I need the person who designed the system to oversee its completion." He was not courting her. He was not there to flatter her. He was offering her a job. "Your Grace, what you suggest is impossible," she said, her mind racing. "A woman, overseeing a team of laborers, engineers, it's madness. I am not asking you to dig the channels yourself. I am asking you to think. I have a private study at Ravenswood Castle. I will have all the plans, the engineers and Mr. Harding, brought to you. I want you to fix it. And what will people say?" "They will say," the Duke said, his voice dropping, "that the Duke of Ravenswood does as he pleases, and that he hires the best. I do not care about your gender, Miss Thorne. I care about your mind. That is a commodity far rarer than a pretty face." He was offering her everything she had ever dreamed of, a chance to use her intellect, to build something real. But the cost was enormous. Her reputation, her family's standing. "My sisters," she began. "Your sisters married well," the Duke cut in, his voice sharp. "You have been left to manage a failing estate while they gossip in London. Is that the life you want?" "No," she said, the word escaping her with a force that surprised them both. "No, it is not." "Good," said the Duke. "My carriage will collect you on Monday. Bring your notebooks." The arrangement was, to put it mildly, explosive. Beatrice, the eldest spinster, was collected 3 times a week in the Duke of Ravenswood's carriage and taken to the castle, not to the drawing-room, but to the vast, imposing library, which had been converted into an operations centre. She worked with Mr. Harding, who was now deeply respectful, and 2 bewildered but brilliant engineers from London. Beatrice, finally in her element, was transformed. She pored over hydraulic charts, she argued about pressure gauges, and she redesigned the primary aqueduct. The Duke, Alastair, was often there. He would not interrupt, but would stand for hours, watching her work. They would dine, chaperoned, of course, by his severe aunt, Lady Honoria, and they would talk, but not of the weather. They spoke of the Corn Laws, of railway expansion, of the new Poor Laws. He found, to his astonishment, that her mind was not just practical, it was philosophical. "You see the connections," he said one evening, over a map of the estate. "You don't just see the flood. You see the poor tenant, the lost crop, the starving child, the subsequent rise in parish aid, and the burden on the local economy. It is all one system, Your Grace," she said, looking up from the map. "People are not separate from the land they live on." He found himself looking at her, really looking, at the way a stray piece of hair fell across her cheek, at the smudge of graphite on her nose, at the intense, focused light in her hazel eyes. He had been surrounded by fawning, beautiful women his entire life. He had never met anyone like her, but the world was not their library. The Tun was aghast. Rosalind and Cecily had returned to London, only to be met with a barrage of questions. "My dear Lady Ashworth," hissed the formidable Countess Leven at a ball, "what is this project your sister is engaged in? Is she his steward?" "She is assisting him with a local matter," Rosalind said weakly, her face pale. "It is deeply inappropriate," declared another. "A young woman, unchaperoned for hours at a time with a man like that. It will ruin you all." The sisters' social standing, for which they had worked so hard, was beginning to teeter. They were being snubbed, Their husbands were furious. "This is your sister, Cecily," Viscount Pinewood raged. He was a man who enjoyed gambling, and his debts were mounting. His credit relied on his wife's social connections. "The Duke is making your family a laughingstock. They're calling her Ravenswood's pet farmer in the clubs." "He's a duke," Cecily cried. "What are we to do? Forbid him?" "No," Pinewood said, a sly, desperate look in his eyes. "But we must stop her. This business must end. If she ruins us, she will pay for it." Back in Hertfordshire, Beatrice was unaware of the storm brewing. She had, for the first time in her life, forgotten to be invisible. She had solved the pressure problem. The work was set to resume. Alistair found her in the library, packing her notes. "It is done, Your Grace," she said, a rare, bright smile on her face. "The pumps will hold." "Alistair," he said quietly. She looked up. "What?" "My name. I would hear you use it." A flush crept up her neck. "Alistair, the project is finished. I suppose I will not be returning." A sudden, sharp melancholy hit her. The thought of returning to the ledgers at Thorncroft was agonizing. "The project is not finished," he said, stepping closer. "It is merely Phase 1. "Phase 1? I am buying the adjoining lands. I intend to build a new canal, and a mill, and proper tenant housing. We intend to," he corrected himself. "I find, Miss Thorne, that my estate has been run rather poorly without you." This was not a job offer. It was something else. It was a proposal of a partnership so radical it had no name. "I cannot," she whispered. "The scandal. My sisters." "Damn your sisters," he said, his voice a low growl. "They would have let you rot in that house. I will not." He reached out, not to touch her, but to tuck that stray piece of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed her temple. It was the lightest touch, but it sent a shock through her. "Beatrice," he said, "do not return to Thorncroft." Before she could answer, the library doors burst open. Her sister Cecily stood there, her face a mask of rage, flanked by her husband, Viscount Pinewood. "Beatrice, you are to come home at once," Cecily shrieked. "You are disgracing us. You are ruining us all." "Cecily, what is the meaning of this?" Beatrice was mortified. The Duke turned, his face hardening into the cold mask the Ton knew so well. "Viscountess," the Duke said, his voice lethally soft. "You are trespassing, and you are screaming. And you, Your Grace, are toying with my sister and destroying my family's name," Cecily shot back, emboldened by her husband's presence. "Cecily, please, this is a misunderstanding," Beatrice pleaded. "We are working." "Working?" Cecily laughed, a high, hysterical sound. "Is that what you call it? Hiding away with him for weeks? The gossip is everywhere. The Morning Post has all but named you. They call you the Hertfordshire schemer." Beatrice's blood ran cold. The Morning Post was the most vicious of the London gossip columns. Viscount Pinewood stepped forward. He was a weaker man than the Duke, but he had a desperate man's bravado. "Your Grace, my wife and I must insist that this arrangement ceases. My sister-in-law is clearly overwrought. She doesn't understand the implications. We are her guardians in this." "You are not my guardian," Beatrice said, finding her voice. "You have no idea what is at stake," Pinewood snapped. "My creditors are calling in my notes. I've been blackballed from 2 clubs, all because you are playing at being an engineer. You will come home, Beatrice, or you will have no home to return to." "That," the Duke said, stepping in front of Beatrice, "is enough." "Alistair, no," Beatrice said, putting a hand on his arm. She turned to her sister. "Cecily, I never intended to harm you. But this work, it is important, more important than your family," Cecily cried. "More important than Rosalind's husband, whose political appointments are being questioned. You were supposed to be the quiet one, the one who stayed home and caused no trouble. You have become selfish." "Selfish?" Beatrice repeated, the word striking her like a slap. "I have run Thorncroft for 10 years. I have balanced the books that your dowries emptied. I have sacrificed every single thing, every hope, every dream to keep that house standing, while you and Rosalind played at being ladies. And you call me selfish?" The venom in her own voice shocked her. Cecily recoiled, her face pale. "It is over, Beatrice," Pinewood said, grabbing his wife's arm. "You've been warned. If you are not home by nightfall, Sir Reginald will be informed of your indiscretion." He put a heavy, insulting emphasis on the word. They stormed out, leaving an echoing silence in the great library. Beatrice sank into a chair, her hands shaking. "They will ruin my father." "They will not," Alistair said, his face rigid with fury. "You don't understand. My father is a gentleman. This will break his heart. They think I am your mistress." "And are you?" he asked, his voice quiet. She looked up, meeting his intense gaze. "You know I am not. But the world believes it. And your sister and her feckless husband are fanning the flames. Pinewood is in deep. I had my solicitors at Coots look into his finances. He is leveraged to the hilt, mostly to a Lord Mortimer." "Lord Mortimer?" Beatrice frowned. "Your political rival?" Alistair nodded grimly. "Pinewood is not just protecting his social standing. He is feeding information to Mortimer. He told Mortimer that I am unstable, obsessed, and being manipulated by a common spinster. Mortimer is using this to question my judgment in the Lords, specifically on the new industrial regulations. Pinewood is trading your reputation to save his own skin." Beatrice felt sick. This was not just gossip. This was a calculated betrayal. Her own family was using her as a pawn in a political game. "Then they are right," she said, standing up, her voice hollow. "I must go home. I must end this. Your reputation, your political work, it is too important. I am just a spinster. It doesn't matter." "It matters," he said, grasping her arm. "Beatrice, do not let them win. Do not let them reduce you back to that ledger." "They have already won," she said, pulling her arm away. "They know my weakness. It is my father. I will not see him destroyed. Goodbye, Your Grace." She walked out of the library, out of the castle, and did not look back. She refused the carriage and walked the 5 miles back to Thorncroft, the gravel biting into her thin shoes. She arrived just after dark, covered in dust, and went straight to her room, locking the door. The spinster of Thorncroft had returned. For 3 days, Thorncroft was a tomb. Beatrice locked herself in the study, but she did not open the ledgers. She sat and stared at the wall. Her father knocked, but she told him she was unwell. Her sisters had returned to London, their duty done. A letter arrived. It was from Alistair. "They are lying. Do not believe them." She burned it. Another letter. "He is using you. Pinewood. Mortimer. This is not about you. It is about me. Do not let him." She burned this one too. On the 4th day, a small package arrived. Inside, on a bed of velvet, was a brass gear, intricately wrought. It was a perfect miniature of the key component she had designed for the steam pump. There was no note. She clutched it until the metal teeth bit into her palm. In London, the Duke of Ravenswood was in a fight. Lord Mortimer had risen in the House of Lords and given a speech, dripping with innuendo, about colleagues whose judgments perhaps have become compromised by rustic influences. The chamber had rippled with knowing laughter. Alistair sat, his face stone. His allies were looking at him, waiting. This was the moment. He was expected to rise, to laugh it off, to make a joke about country air, and to publicly, implicitly, discard the rustic influence. He was to cut Beatrice adrift and save himself. He did not. He stood up. The chamber fell silent. "My lords," he said, his voice ringing with cold power. "Lord Mortimer speaks of compromised judgment. He is correct. My judgment was compromised. For years I listened to fools. I listened to men who told me, it cannot be done. I listened to engineers who said my lands were worthless." He paused, his gaze sweeping the chamber. "And then I found a mind that showed them all to be the charlatans they are. A mind of such clarity and brilliance that it has already saved thousands of my tenants from flooding and will revolutionize hydrology in this country. This rustic influence, to which the noble lord refers, has more intellect in her little finger than Lord Mortimer has in his entire acquaintance." He turned to look directly at Lord Mortimer. "And as for my compromise, I have indeed been compromised. I have been compromised by integrity, by genius, and I will not, now or ever, suffer that genius to be insulted by a man who finances his political attacks through the gambling debts of ruined viscounts." The shot was so direct, so brutal, that a collective gasp went up. Viscount Pinewood, sitting in the gallery, went white as death. The Duke of Ravenswood had just declared war. He had not denied Beatrice. He had defended her. He had tied his entire reputation to hers. He had chosen the spinster over his career. He left the chamber without another word. The Times would call it the most dramatic speech of the session. He rode all night, not in his carriage, but on horseback, arriving at Thorncroft as the sun was rising. He didn't knock. He tethered his horse and walked straight to the gardens, where he knew she walked in the mornings. Beatrice was there, pacing the damp gravel path, the brass gear clutched in her hand. She looked pale and exhausted. She saw him and stopped. You should not be here. You have ruined yourself." She had read the reports in the paper. "That is a matter of opinion," he said, walking toward her. He was still in his London clothes, muddy and dishevelled, but he had never looked more powerful. "Alistair, you have to leave," she pleaded. "My sisters... Pinewood." "Pinewood is finished," he said curtly. "After my speech, his creditors, of whom I am now the primary one, have seized his assets. He and your sister will be living in a rented cottage in Bath by Christmas. As for Rosalind, her husband has more sense. He has already sent me a note of profound apology." Beatrice stared at him, trying to comprehend the scale of his actions. He had dismantled her enemies in a single stroke. "But why?" she whispered. "To defend me? Why?" "Because," he said, stopping directly in front of her. "In London, surrounded by all those powerful men, I realized I did not give a damn about any of them. I realized the only opinion in the world I cared about was yours. I realized that my power is useless, a hollow, ringing brass bell, unless you are there to share it. And then, Alistair St. John, the Duke of Ravenswood, the most powerful and ruthless peer in England, did the one thing no one had ever seen him do. He knelt. He went down on one knee, on the cold, damp gravel, in the morning light, before the plain, practical spinster. Beatrice's hands flew to her mouth, the cold, sharp edges of the brass gear pressing into her palm. "Your Grace! Alistair! Get up, please. You are muddying your coat. What are you doing?" "Beatrice Thorne," he said, his voice raw. He ignored the damp gravel grinding into his knee, his gaze locked on hers. All the coldness, the granite facade he showed the world, was gone. In its place was a raw, terrifying vulnerability that struck her silent. I am doing what I should have done the moment I read your first letter. I am securing the single greatest asset I have ever encountered. You have ruined yourself, she whispered, the tears she'd held back for days finally blurring her vision. I saw the papers, the Morning Post, Lord Mortimer. They said you were compromised, that your judgment was infected. It is, he said, a harsh, almost laugh escaping him. It is infected with clarity. I stood in that chamber, Beatrice. I listened to that fool, Mortimer, preen and posture, alluding to my rustic influence. And they all waited. He reached out, not to touch her, but as if to grasp the air between them. They waited for me to laugh, to make a witty, dismissive remark, to throw you away like a trifle to save my own political skin. That is the game. That is what a sensible man would have done. And you did not, she breathed, already knowing the answer. I did not, he confirmed. I stood, and I told them the truth. I told them my judgment was compromised. For years I had listened to sycophants and fools who told me what I wanted to hear. I listened to engineers who told me it cannot be done. And then, his voice dropped, I found a mind that showed them all to be the charlatans they are. I told the House of Lords that this rustic influence had more integrity and genius in her little finger than Lord Mortimer had in his entire, indebted, parasitic acquaintance. He saw the shock on her face and nodded. Oh, yes. I spoke of his financing. I spoke of the gambling debts of ruined viscounts. Beatrice suddenly understood. Pinewood. Cecily's husband. Pinewood is finished, Alistair said, his tone flat and cold, the Duke of Ravenswood returning for a brief, lethal moment. He was feeding information to Mortimer to save his own skin, using your reputation as his currency. After my speech, his creditors, of whom I am now the primary one, called in every note. He and your sister will be living in a rented cottage in Bath by Christmas, if they are lucky. Beatrice felt a chill. The speed, the totality of his power. It was breathtaking. He had dismantled her enemies in a single stroke. And Rosalind? Her husband, Lord Ashworth, has more sense. He sent me a note of profound apology this morning. He values his political appointments. The full scope of his actions settled on her. He hadn't just defended her. He had publicly, irrevocably, declared war on her behalf. He had tied his entire reputation to hers. He had chosen the Spinster over his career. But why, she whispered, to do all that? For me? Because, he said, his voice softening again. In that moment, standing in that chamber, I realized I did not give a single damn about any of them. I realized the only opinion in the world I cared about was yours. I realized my wealth, my title, my power. It is all a hollow, ringing brass bell unless you are there to share it, unless I am using it to protect you. He shifted, reaching into his coat pocket. He did not pull out a gaudy diamond, the kind her sisters would have coveted. He produced a simple, heavy gold band, set with a single, square-cut sapphire. It was the color of the sky just before dawn, deep and clear and full of promise. They say I am a man of stone, he said, his voice thick with an emotion she had never heard. You are the only person who ever saw that I was not. They call you a spinster. I call you my equal. They say I am being manipulated. They are correct. You have manipulated your way into my heart, a place I had long since barricaded. He held the ring out to her. The sunlight caught the stone, and it seemed to burn with a cold fire. I am not offering you a job, Beatrice, and I am not offering you protection, though you shall always have it. I am offering you a partnership, in all things, in the fields, in the mills, in Parliament, and in life. They expected me to choose a child from the debutantes to be my duchess, but I do not want a child. I want a woman. I want you. Will you be my duchess? Will you marry me, Beatrice?" Beatrice was crying, silent tears tracking through the dust on her cheeks. She had spent a lifetime managing accounts, balancing losses, and here was a debt she could never repay, a profit she had never dared to calculate. She had spent a lifetime being invisible, and here was a man who saw her more clearly than she saw herself. She did not give him her hand to be pulled up. Instead, she knelt too. She sank to the gravel in front of him, her simple dress pooling in the dirt. She took his face in her shaking hands, her thumbs brushing away the exhaustion under his eyes. "They say you are a duke," she whispered. "I say you are a storm, and I am not afraid of the rain." She leaned in and kissed him. It was not a coy, practiced kiss. It was a kiss of acceptance, of relief, of graphite and ledgers meeting steel and power. It was the meeting of two minds, and it was more potent than any physical embrace. When they parted, he was smiling, a true, unguarded smile that transformed his entire face. "Is that a yes?" he murmured. "That," she said, her own voice shaky with a joy so fierce it hurt, "is a yes. Yes, Alistair. Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. It was heavy, solid, and a perfect fit. He then rose, pulling her up with him, and for a long moment they simply stood in the overgrown garden of Thorncroft, the most powerful man in England and the woman no one had ever seen, holding each other as if they were the only two people left in the world. "What now?" she asked, her practical mind already spinning. "Now," he said, kissing her forehead, "we go inside. You're going to pack, and we are going to inform your father that his eldest daughter is to become the Duchess of Ravenswood." They walked back to the house, hand in hand. Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, was sweeping the front steps. She saw them, saw their linked hands, saw the mud on the Duke's trousers, and the impossible, radiant joy on Miss Beatrice's face. The broom clattered to the stone. "Mrs. Gable," Beatrice said, her voice steadier than she felt. "His Grace will be staying for luncheon. Please, find the good china." They found Sir Reginald in his study, squinting at a dried fern. "Father," Beatrice said gently. He looked up, blinking. "Beatrice, and Your Grace, goodness, you are very muddy. Has there been an accident?" "No, Sir Reginald," Alistair said, stepping forward. Beatrice had never seen him look uncertain, but he did now, before this gentle, unassuming botanist. "There has been a development. I have come, that is, I am here, to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage." Sir Reginald's smile was warm, but confused. "My daughter? But Rosalind and Cecily are already—" His eyes widened as he finally looked at Beatrice. He saw the ring on her finger. He saw the Duke's proprietary, proud gaze. "Oh," Sir Reginald whispered. "Oh my." "Beatrice, sir," Alistair clarified, his voice firm. "I am asking to marry Beatrice." Sir Reginald looked at his eldest daughter. He saw the woman who had run his house, saved his estate, and sacrificed her own life for his. And he saw her, for the first time, truly happy. His eyes filled with tears. "Your Grace," he said, his voice cracking. You are a man of noted intelligence. I am not surprised. I am only surprised it took the rest of the world so long to see. Yes. My goodness, yes." He rushed to Beatrice and hugged her fiercely. "My girl, my clever, clever girl, you deserve the world." "I am settling for Derbyshire, father," she whispered back. laughing through her own tears. The news was a thunderclap. The plans for the wedding were the first battle. Alistair's aunt, Lady Honoria, a woman who looked like she had been weaned on lemon juice, descended upon Thorncroft. "A state wedding is required," she declared, looking at Thorncroft's peeling wallpaper with open disgust. "Westminster Abbey, the Archbishop of Canterbury. We will need a guest list of no less than 500. The king himself must be invited." Beatrice, who was overseeing the packing of her notebooks, looked up. "No." Lady Honoria's jaw snapped shut. "I beg your pardon?" "No," Beatrice repeated, her voice polite but unyielding. "I will not be married in a spectacle. The Tun has had its entertainment at my expense. This will not be part of it. I will be married here, in my father's parish church. The guests will be my father, my tenants, and anyone who genuinely wishes us well. That will be all." "Alistair!" Lady Honoria shrieked, turning to her nephew. She is mad." Alistair, who had been watching the exchange with unconcealed amusement, set down his teacup. "Aunt, Beatrice is the Duchess of Ravenswood. Her word on this and all other matters is final. I find her plan efficient and perfect. Now, if you will excuse us, we have to review the quarterly reports for the North Pasture." Lady Honoria stared, speechless. The spinster had not just tamed the Duke, she was managing him. She huffed, but for the first time, a glimmer of respect entered her eyes. "Very well. But the dress, it must be from Paris." "It will not," Beatrice said. "It will be made by the local seamstress. I have already drawn the design." The wedding was, as promised, quiet. It was held on a crisp autumn morning. Rosalind and Lord Ashworth were there, sitting in the front pew. Rosalind, humbled and pale, had written Beatrice a long, tearful letter of apology, begging to be allowed to come. Beatrice, seeing the genuine remorse, had forgiven her. Cecily and her husband, of course, were not there. A single, furious, spiteful letter had arrived from Bath, which Beatrice had read and then calmly fed to the fire in her father's study. "She made her choices," Beatrice had said. "I am making mine." Beatrice's dress was not a fashionable monstrosity of lace and pearls. It was a gown of heavy, deep cream silk, with a high neck and long, practical sleeves. It was elegant, severe, and utterly beautiful. She was, as her father whispered when he walked her down the aisle, a queen. Not a princess. A queen. When she reached the altar, Alistair was waiting. He did not look at the crowd. He looked only at her. The vows were simple, traditional. But when he said, "I, Alistair, take thee, Beatrice," his voice was so thick with emotion that the entire church seemed to hold its breath. She was no longer Miss Thorne, the invisible daughter. She was Beatrice St. John, Duchess of Ravenswood. Their honeymoon was spent not in Paris or Rome, but at Ravenswood Castle, where the two of them, joined by a team of astonished but thrilled engineers, spent 2 weeks finalizing the plans for the new canal system. It was, Beatrice reflected, the most romantic holiday she could have ever imagined. Their arrival in London for the winter season was what society had been truly waiting for. This was the real test. The first ball was at Ravenswood House, a fortress of Mayfair. The Tun gathered, expecting to see the Duke's eccentric, dowdy pet farmer whom he had been mad enough to marry. Beatrice was terrified. She stood at the top of the grand staircase, her hand on Alistair's arm. She was not in borrowed muslin. She was in a gown of deep Ravenswood blue, the colour of his eyes and her ring. The famous Ravenswood sapphires, which had not been seen in public for a generation, were cold and heavy around her throat. "I cannot do this," she whispered, her hands shaking. "They are all waiting." "Yes, they are," Alistair said, turning her to face him. He did not pat her hand. He held her gaze. "You are not here tonight for their approval. They are here for yours. You are the Duchess of Ravenswood. This is your house. They are your guests. And I," he kissed her hand, "am your husband. Now, shall we go down and see who is worth speaking to?" He led her down the stairs. The music, the chatter, all of it died into a deafening silence. Every eye was on her. The formidable Countess Leven, the woman who had insulted her in Hertfordshire, was the first to approach, her smile a painted-on razor. "Your Grace," the Countess purred, curtsying low. "What a transformation. You have climbed very high, very fast." Beatrice looked at the woman who had dismissed her so easily. She did not flush. She did not stammer. She smiled, a small, cool smile. "Countess, how kind of you to notice. But I did not climb. I was recognized. There is a difference." The Countess's smile faltered. "You are concerned for my reputation in Hertfordshire, I recall," Beatrice continued, her voice clear and carrying. "You will be pleased to know my rustic influence is now informing His Grace's new agricultural policy. We find a fed tenant is a happy tenant, and a happy tenant is a profitable one. A radical notion, I know, but it seems to be working. His Grace's estates are projected to be the most productive in England by next year." She paused, then delivered the final, polite blow. "You must come to the country and see it. If you are at all interested in agriculture, that is." The Countess, utterly defeated, could only curtsy again. "Your Grace." The message was sent. The Tun saw it. The Spinster was not a meek mouse to be pitied. She was a lioness. She was her husband's partner, not his pet. And the Duke, standing beside her, was watching the exchange not with menace, but with an expression of such profound, unadulterated pride that no one in the room could mistake it. Lord Mortimer, standing alone in a corner, saw it. He looked diminished, a ghost at the feast. He raised his glass to Alistair in a silent toast of surrender. Alistair, his eyes on his wife, ignored him completely. But the final triumph was not at a ball. It came a year later. The Ravenswood proposal, a sweeping land reform bill based on Beatrice's drainage principles and Alistair's political clout, was being debated in Parliament. It was revolutionary, and Alistair had pushed the boundaries even further. He had secured his wife an invitation to speak. Not at a ladies' tea, but at the Royal Society. It was unheard of. The day arrived. The room was packed. It was a sea of grey-haired, sceptical men. The whispers were loud. A woman? A duchess playing at science? It's an indulgence by Ravenswood. Beatrice walked to the podium. She was not in jewels. She was in a practical dark wool dress, her hair pulled back. She was terrified. But then she saw Alistair in the front row, looking at her as he had in the garden, as if she were the only person in the world. He nodded once, as if to say, "Tell them." So she did. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice shaking only for a second. "For generations, we have accepted the will of God in the flooding of our lands. We have accepted the loss of crops, the destitution of tenants, and the souring of the earth as inevitable. But the water is not angry. It is merely inefficient." She unrolled her first diagram. The room, which had been shuffling, went quiet. She spoke of hydraulic pressure, of steam-driven pumps, of crop rotation, and of fluid dynamics. She did not posture. She did not flatter. She gave them data. When she finished, there was a stunned silence. Then, a grizzled old man, a Professor Davers, stood up. "Ma'am, Duchess, this is all very fine on paper, but the pressure required for the main pump, it is not theoretically sustainable. Beatrice met his gaze. Professor Davies, on page 4 of my distributed paper, you will find the calculations for the steam-driven pressure valves, which I designed myself. The system is not theoretical. It has been fully operational on the Ravenswood estates for 6 months. Our crop yield is up 42%. The tenants in the Western Marsh, who have lived in damp-ridden cottages for a century, now have dry homes. The system, she added, is already turning a profit. Silence. Then, a slow, building applause. It was not polite. It was genuine. She had not won them over with her title. She had won them with facts. Alistair was the first on his feet, leading the standing ovation. He did not rush to her side. He simply stood, watching his wife, the woman they had all called a spinster, as she was immediately surrounded by the greatest minds in England, all clamouring, "Your Grace, could you explain the gear ratio again?" "Duchess, the implications for the coal mines." He knew, in that moment, what the ton was only just learning. Her sisters had married lords, seeking titles and jewels, but Beatrice Thorne had held out for something more. She had waited for a partner. And he, the most powerful duke in England, was the man who had been smart enough to find her, and humble enough to kneel. He had not just married a duchess, he had married a revolution. And so, the eldest spinster, who was ignored by everyone, became the woman who advised Parliament and redesigned the English countryside. The Duchess of Ravenswood proved that a sharp mind is more dazzling than any diamond, and that true power lies not in a title, but in knowing your own worth. Beatrice didn't just marry a duke. She found a partner who saw her genius when the rest of the world saw only a plain, quiet woman. What did you think of Beatrice's quiet strength and Alistair's choice? Do you believe a meeting of minds is the most powerful romance of all? Let us know your thoughts on this story in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. If you loved this story of hidden strength and unexpected love, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs a good story, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more dramas just like this one. We truly appreciate your support.